And I think what the Kids in the Hall did really is emblematic of that moment in time in the 80s and the 90s. That's we were weird, we were goofy, we were kooky.
Hi everyone, I'm Iskwē and welcome back to the Chesterfield. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the great Canadian comedy show Kids in the Hall with Ali Hassan. Ali is a very familiar voice on CBC Radio. The host of Laugh Out Loud and also Canada Reads, he's toured across the country at festivals like Just for Laughs and with his stand-up show called Muslim Interrupted. Now, before we get Ali on the line from Toronto, I want to tell you about a giveaway that we have. The Chesterfield is produced by Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. Friends is a nonprofit organization funded completely by individual Canadians, and as a thank you to monthly donors, the Chesterfield has organized some special perks. This week, Friends monthly donors can win signed copies of Ali Hassan's stand-up special. So please click the link in the video description to our website where you can make a donation or just get some more information. All this being said, please welcome Ali Hassan. Ali, welcome to the Chesterfield.
Is that what we're... Yes, that's the name of a couch? Am I...
That is it is a very Canadian term for the couch.
Yes.
I can see clearly that you are in fact on a Chesterfield. So way to be on brand for this interview or this.
This is made in Italy. Is that ruin things or does that stay on brand?
I mean, I think it's okay. I think
okay.
Yeah, I think it becomes a Chesterfield the moment it crosses the border.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I am in fact not on a Chesterfield. I'm on an armchair. But
well, that's why you said, welcome to the Chesterfield. I was like, me or you? And
yeah, I know. It's confusing. Yeah. It's fair.
Well, thank you. It feels good to be here.
Well, great. I'm glad. Today we are chatting about your selection for inspirational Canadian art. Would you care to disclose what your selection is?
It would be weird if I didn't, right? Come all the way and then just be like, nah, I want to keep it to myself.
Actually, let's talk about Nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about that porta potty on my front lawn that some workers left today instead. That's what I want to get off my chest. No, I would love to talk about the Kids in the Hall. I feel like, to this day, all 5 of the members of the Kids in the Hall are still, Dave Foley of Kids in the Hall fame, Scott Thompson of Kids in the Hall. They've done so much work. They've done so much in 30 years. I guess it was the mid 80s that Kids in the Hall started. But that's still such a defining, seminal piece of work. That entire, 5-6 years of their lives is just amazing. It took people over, and if somebody says they don't know what the Kids in the Hall is, that's, relationships would probably break up over that. And they were just like sketch machines.
Yeah. And they did everything.
And everything. They'd play so many ridiculous characters, and I really felt like Canada really excelled in exporting the bizarre back then. In fact, there was a show called Bizarre that I used to watch. It was called Bizarre. John Biner, I think. SCTV was bizarre. A lot of the stuff we did was just plain goofy and kooky, and it was so fun. And I think what the Kids in the Hall did really is emblematic of that moment in time in the 80s and the 90s. That's we were weird, we were goofy, we were kooky, and the comedians who we produced were often those Howie Mandels and Jim Carreys, and these were weird guys. These were like not normal. You listen to a 20-minute set of Howie Mandel back then and you were like, I have no idea who that human being is. I have learned nothing about Howie Mandel. I just know that was a weird set from a weird guy, and I laughed a bunch of times. And I felt like the Kids in the Hall was similar to that. Over the years, we've learned who they are, and it's been a wonderful to, get to know them. I have gotten to know some of them personally, which has been a thrill. And I don't know. I feel like you cannot talk about comedy, and I'm not a sketch comic. I'm a stand-up, but I appreciate in my very core what Kids in the Hall did for Canada and for Canadian comedy.
I have some very, very vivid memories of because I was in elementary school when the Squishing the Head
right
came out, and I clearly remember that the first interaction with that was, it started off really funny, and then, you know, it became the thing that everybody was doing to each other.
Right.
And I'm like, this is now getting frustrating because everybody's squishing my head all the time.
Sure.
Do you remember your first like moment with Kids in the Hall?
Yeah, it was Head Squisher as well.
Mhm.
There was a Mr. Cabbage Head, and you know, as a goofy teenager, of course you want to put pieces of lettuce and cabbage on your head. Of course you want any excuse to do
It
that.
was so
Maybe cut
weird.
some eyes out of it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
great time.
Yeah.
And then you know, Mr. Canoe Head and things like that. Anything. It's always something with the head. Always something with the head
Right.
going on. Even Chicken Lady was so head. There was a lot of head movement. And it was they really knew how to make the most out of props and the most out of their own facial reactions
Yeah.
and actions. And it was really terrific. Again, I would encourage anybody to go take a look from the beginning and watch it through the years and see how it evolved, and then also you know, kind of get to know these 5 gentlemen who are part of it and see what their lives are about. I've been able to interview Scott Thompson a bunch of times and work with him, and he fashions himself to be an old war horse. You know, it's really fun talking to that guy. He's got, you know, battle wounds and battle scars that he can talk about from working in Canada and the US and working with these dear friends, and then breaking up and then working with them again. And it's truly like lives lived. I'm anxious for the day that he gets some, you know, Canadian Icon Award. I think
100%.
once Margaret Atwood has been celebrated enough, it's going to be Scott Thompson after that, I think.
Was your work influenced by them at all?
My work was influenced only in the sense of try it.
Try
You
it.
know,
Yeah.
that sort of that daring, that fearlessness,
Yeah.
that like, well, I'm not sure if that'll be funny or not. I'm not sure if this will work or not. And it's like, well, try it.
So, okay, this show was on CBC, right? This was on CBC in the late 80s, early 90s. How do you feel about that show being on CBC?
Well, there's 2 things that come to mind as far as network goes. Number one, it reminds me of how daring the CBC could be. You could have something like the Beachcombers,
Yep.
and then you could have Kids in the Hall in the same network. And it was like, I don't know, you're really getting a wide, you know, there may not have been much overlap between those 2 audiences.
Yeah.
And people would argue that there's probably that going on again now at CBC as well. But I do remember it being a little bit more of a fearless time, and that might have been because of the audiences as well were more willing to accept and go places and more open to different things. But the other thing that comes to mind is that it also got picked up by HBO. I mean, that's really telling. HBO was this like daring sort of network. You had to pay for it. It was cable, you know, like it was paid cable, and they were out there sort of taking risks. And the fact that they would go to Canada to purchase something to be on their new daring network, I mean, that's huge. That speaks so highly of Kids in the Hall.
However, interestingly, when the show branched into the US, it was censored a bunch in order to, I don't know, maybe satisfy whatever kind of requirements that American television had. So a lot of the religious context was removed. Most specifically, the one that stands out was Dr. Seuss's Bible. Did you ever see that skit?
I remember that. Oh, of course that would be horrific.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but I'll sub in on the CBC. I'll guest host on shows. And if I say, God damn it, they're like, okay, we're going to have to re-record that part or edit that part. And I'm like, oh, we're so sensitive as Canadians. And twice I've been told, no, that's for our American audiences. That's for the NPR or PRX. You can't have God and damn in the same word.
So then what do you think it is about Kids in the Hall that makes it uniquely Canadian?
You know, it's a tough thing to answer because it's hard to know what is uniquely Canadian now.
Right.
Kim's Convenience is as uniquely Canadian as, I don't know, Big Brother Canada, because it's Canadians of all different, you know, walks of life being themselves on a Canadian platform, right? We used to joke about, like, it's a Canadian production. You can see the microphone dipping into the top of the, and you're like, come on, pick it up. I think the quality of programming is excellent.
Mhm.
I'm very, very biased. I think often the comedy is a little bit more thoughtful. I think in comedy shows, I really do enjoy a lot of Canadian comedy. Now, what made Kids in the Hall Canadian? That's your question. I mean, it was just at a time, SCTV had wrapped up a few years earlier, and as I said, Bizarre was a show on television, and I felt like we were, at that time, what we did best was weird.
Right.
And I think that's what made it uniquely Canadian. This willingness to be weird and edgy and different and unpredictable.
Mhm.
I thought that was really great.
So with that being the sort of state of comedy and this idea that you share about it being weird,
Yeah.
which I agree with, by the way, and
Yes.
totally love.
Yes.
How has your experiences with Canadian audiences versus international audiences been then, in that receptiveness or lack of, or whatever?
I mean, again, it's not that easy to go Canadian versus American in that respect, because a Chicago audience or a New York audience will be very different from an Erie, Pennsylvania audience. I always said, how there's this stereotype about Canada being a peaceful nation, so people would put the Canada flag on their backpacks as they traveled.
Mm-hmm.
But I always thought, for me personally, I've met Canadians I don't like. There's a bunch of them, massive jerks. But if I put a CBC logo on my backpack, now you're really bringing it into a much more, sort of like-minded group of people that you would probably enjoy meeting when you're traveling.
Right.
So that's who's coming to my show, the people who would connect with me if I had a CBC logo on my backpack. So I'm not sure if I'm in a position to say how they are different, but the Canadian audiences who know me and who come to my shows, I cannot say enough good things about them. I just love them. I love talking to them after the show and hanging out after the show. And my wife is just blown away. She's like, you went for drinks with 4 strangers in Nelson. I'm like, they were the nicest. One guy was from Quebec.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you that has been a nice part of touring in Canada.
Yeah.
For me as well. So now with stand-up, comedy isn't necessarily high on the list of funding,
It's not even making the list, to be honest. It's not even there.
No, it's really not. And as you know, I've sat on many juries for different arts councils, and anytime comedy kind of even tiptoes in, it's just like, it seems to be very quickly tiptoed right back out.
It's reminiscent of the those rules that I was telling you. The US won't let you say God damn it.
Yeah.
Right. Even though what I'm talking about is my son, let's say, crapped his pants. And I'm like, God damn it, he crapped his pants again. God's not even in the picture. It's just sort of a saying, but it's blasphemy and it's wrong and you can't do it, right? It's sort of like that. That's how I feel comedy has become. A bunch of people saw a bunch of comedians do fart jokes and weird prop humor, and they were like, you know what? Comedy's not an art. And it just somehow became that. It just became that. And now we are sort of hat in hand begging these various organizations and councils and government bodies, please recognize us. Mm-hmm. Comedy is not whatever you saw that scarred you, whatever hurt you years ago that you put comedy away on some other shelf completely. It's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. It unifies people. It brings them laughter, especially now in a time more than ever you need it. These live experiences are just unbeatable. And you leave feeling, again, richer for having had the experience. And I don't know, I can't fully get my mind around why comedy has been banished to the dungeon, but it really has to be brought back onto the into the light.
So why do you feel, or do you feel, CBC is important to Canadian arts?
Look, Kids in the Hall, we mentioned off the top, seminal piece of work, and really spoke to the times. The times were in Canada where we love that zany, weird, oddball stuff.
Yeah.
And for sure, there's still space for all that in this country. There's no question about that. But who's to say that Schitt's Creek and Kim's Convenience and even Jerry D was in talks with Will Arnett, and Mr. D was possibly going to be Bob. I mean, these shows are getting global audiences. They're going to Netflix. They're being, right now, Schitt's Creek is some younger person's Kids in the Hall.
Absolutely.
It's their seminal piece of work. So CBC is continuing to do all that. It is continuing to fund and promote great art. And also, CBC doesn't end at television. On radio, we produce incredible dramas, incredible documentaries, great talent. I'm speaking for, Laugh Out Loud, the show that I host on CBC Radio. We go out and we record comedians that all Canadians will not have heard. And then we put it on the air for however million listeners we have, and they get to hear somebody who has spent his or her entire life in Victoria, BC, and never got the chance to travel out of the province of BC. And now all across Canada, people get to hear that person's comedy.
Fantastic show. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then CBC, the web version of CBC, not just GEM, but even, I subscribe to CBC Arts, these various newsletters. And I guess if there was no CBC and I had none of those things, I mean, what a terrible vision that is, and when certain politicians are aiming to cut down the CBC or cut down libraries, it's the same feeling for me. I mean, these are a place of learning and celebration of the arts. It's I don't know, do we always get it right? No, but cutting us down certainly is not the right direction as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm so grateful to hear you say those words. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's such an integral part of our culture overall to be able to have that, the public broadcasting and this public voice that we get to, feel a little less fear in terms of what we present and how we present, because we feel supported by each other.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for being such a strong voice in that realm. And I really appreciate you coming to hang out with us today on the Chesterfield and sharing all of these bits with us today.
It's my pleasure. I enjoyed your questions. I enjoyed answering them, and I enjoyed walking down memory lane towards to Kids in the Hall. I watched a few videos just to get myself back in the, and just even the dun, 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 I'm like, it's just good vibes. Just great vibes. That when a theme song already gets you in the right mood.
Right. That's exactly it.
Upon something good.
I did the same thing. And just even watching the visual that went along with the theme song, I'm like, oh man, what a drive this was.
Yeah, it really was. I enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah. Iko Sani, thank you so much.